I'm Chaplain Jacob Scott of the Oregon National Guard. This is the Hope in the Trenches podcast. Where going forward, I'll sit down for conversations with people who offer interesting and informative perspectives on finding strength for life and work in the trenches, and even improving our spiritual posture. Whether you feel like you're under heavy bombardment or ready to go over the top toward a new objective, it's good to be with you. My guests today are two of our great Air National Guard officers, Kristi Raudy and Jared Boyer, who serve with the 173rd Fighter Wing at Kingsley Field in beautiful Klamath Falls, Oregon. If you're not familiar with the 173rd and their mission, they are the training base for the F-15 pilots in the United States Air Force. And Kingsley Field in Klamath Falls is in a stunningly beautiful part of the country, the southern Oregon Cascades. I was blessed to live and work in Klamath Falls for 7 years and loved the community. I spent a lot of time running the trails in the Klamath Basin with friends in the local running club. Shout out to the Linkville Lopers. Back in the fall, I read an article from the 173rd highlighting two of their officers and airmen who were participating in the 2021 All-Air Force Marathon, which was supposed to happen at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio last fall, but it went virtual. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk to them about running, that lifestyle, and the benefits of running across the board, and about that marathon event. So First Lieutenant Jared Boyer is a finance officer with the 173rd. He grew up in Pennsylvania and grew up playing all kinds of sports, particularly swimming and volleyball, and he played competitive volleyball in college and into his 30s. After college, he said a cousin introduced him to running, and that started him competing in team adventure races. Then Jared joined the Guard, got a full-time job, ran into work nearly daily, he said. And he reports that he used to run for an hour and up to 3 hours with his daughters in a running stroller just to give his wife a break. Soon, he said he was running 45 to 65 miles a week, running several ultras or ultra marathons. So those are races over 26.2 miles, relays, and marathons. He competed once in the Oregon Best Warrior competition event at Camp Rylea. That's a brave airman, Jared. He also served as a race director for the Kingsley Field Duathlon event for 4 years. That's a running and biking race that highlights some of the area trails there in the Klamath Basin. Currently, Lieutenant Boyer says that he uses running to scout animals for the hunting season and drop some weight for jiu-jitsu. He's competing in a tournament in March. Then in June, he's lining up a wild and scenic rogue 40-mile unsupported trail run for a Father's Day weekend retreat. And then he says he's got his sights on one last U.S. Air Force marathon coming up in September. Captain Kristi Raudy is a physician's assistant with the 173rd Fighter Wing Medical Group, and in her civilian vocation works for Northwest Brain and Spine in Bend, Oregon. She grew up in Alaska, graduating from Chugiak High School. She said that she moved into a fish camp right after high school before she discovered the Alaska National Guard, enlisting as a weapons troop in June 1999. She was quickly picked up for the Alaska Air Guard's marathon team and made the national team that first year. She ran a few marathons over the next couple of years, including a 3:17 at Chicago in 2002. That's nice and fast. And that qualified her for the Boston Marathon, which she ran in 2003. Kristi shipped off to Airman Leadership School quickly after Boston, and by summer's end, she was in Afghanistan, spending most of her time there in Kandahar. She wrote that she ran nearly every day with her 9mm over there. It's savage. Upon returning to the States, she started racing for the National Guard's biathlon team in 2003 at Yellowstone National Park. Then in 2004, she became a mother, and she delivered her son in 2005, but kept on racing. She showed up to the Portland Marathon with a 3-month-old nursing child and then had her daughter in 2006. She said there was a lull in her racing for a bit as she realized that she'd completed about 8 years as a load toad. I'd never heard that term before, but a load toad is a weapons troop. And so she realized it was time for a career change. She shipped off to medic school before her daughter's first birthday in 2007. And after she finished that training in 2008, she said her mother died. And she says that that was rough. With 2 small children, 3 stepchildren, her marriage was failing, trying to continue coursework with the local university, and grieving. so she said she got back into running. She said that life always seemed to be more emotionally manageable when I was running. I was able to handle stressors better. And I found that I surrounded myself with a more motivated and positive crowd, and I haven't looked back. She ended up jumping back in the National Guard's marathon and biathlon teams until she got into medical school. And she said she injured her hip on the White River 50 miler in 2014 and hasn't competed in any ultras since, but her race of choice now is still the half marathon. Well, Kristi and Jared, thank you so much for joining us today on Hope in the Trenches.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, Kristi, let's start with you. Boy, that's a great story. When did you become a runner? Because obviously, it sounds like you were a runner before the Guard.
I would say starting back junior high, high school, but definitely a little more committed after high school, if you will. It's just an evolutionary process, I suppose. No distinct moment. Just evolutionary, if you will.
Sure. And how did you find out about the marathon team? Because I think I was in the Guard for several years before I learned that the National Guard would sponsor stuff like that, like marathons and biathlon athletes.
Sure. For the PT test, this was up in Alaska, running the flight line for just the usual mile and a half, and the team captain happened to be racing, and he's like, "Whoa, hold up!"
Oh, great!
And then, he invited me that first year to Lincoln, Nebraska, and the rest is history.
Well, I'm sure your bio, we left out a lot of details there. How did you end up serving with the Air Guard in Klamath Falls?
So about 18 years in service with Air National Guard Base, which was later BRAC to Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, JBER. I moved, the kids and I was divorced, finished med school, and didn't want to sign a contract with any facility, whatnot. So we hopped in the car and moved to Bend, Oregon. And I was actually a line officer, a logistics officer at the time. Mm-hmm. And one of the fellas that I went to officer candidate school with was part of Kingsley Field, which I'd never heard of. I didn't really realize where he was from. He saw on Facebook that I had moved to Oregon, and I was chatting with the Portland Air Guard to transfer. And he's like, "Oh no, hold up.
Yeah.
You need to come down here." So checked it out. It was beautiful. Folks were nice, and changed the plan mid-plan.
Funny how that happens.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Jared, you had an interesting story too. And growing up in Pennsylvania out on the East Coast, how did you end up serving in Oregon with the Air National Guard?
So I grew up in Pennsylvania and was working for Harley-Davidson at the time, just got married. So I've been in there for about 10 years. And they were actually, since the recession of 2008, we're going to downscale. So then I took the severance package. My wife and I were pregnant at the time, and we just knew we wanted to always move west. Like, it wasn't even an option. We were going to move it, and it severed enough ties for it to be perfect timing. And then, so when I arrived here, I was in Oregon. I was an electrician with my father-in-law, which was great because I was outside all the time and doing some work in the fields, but I didn't have insurance. So then I knew the Guard existed here. So I just basically stopped into the office and then started to hear all of the availability the Guard has to offer. And having worked for Harley, I was just like, this is ridiculous. You guys offer some incredible packages and deals and the ability to travel. And then my grandfather was in World War II as a Air Force or Army pilot. And so I just kind of I just felt like that was a good call. And then to provide insurance for my young family. So that's kind of how I jumped on board. And then the more I was here, the more I fell in love with the people, the place, and the kind of culture that the Guard has.
Yeah, and in Kingsley Field and Klamath Falls, that's got to be one of the best kept secrets in the Air Force.
It is, and I truly believe that. We're kind of left here as a forgotten item, but my gosh, I think if you look at the grand scheme of it, we get paid and taken care of really well. We have a really good mission because we get pilots from all over the country. Yeah, in a humble little area where you get a chance to find your own little slice of heaven, a lake, a river, a mountain trail, whatever. It's really a nice gem.
It is. When I served there, I met a lot of people who ended up stationed there and never left.
Yeah. Yeah, we get quite a lot of active duty people converting over. So I think that's a telling sign.
Well, I think your stories, but both of you really highlight just how much opportunity there is for us serving in the military. I mean, we get thanked for our service all the time, but I usually try to point out that it's been an incredible blessing to me, and I've received so much by my service. And there are so many just incredible and really unique opportunities that you wouldn't find working anywhere else. Even, I mean, Harley Davidson's cool, but there's a lot of stuff that you can do in the military that you just would not have a chance to do in the civilian world.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know a lot of people that go on their training runs carrying a pistol. I mean, I do know a few, but... So you were both selected to represent the Air Guard in the Inter Air Force Marathon last September, and that event became virtual. That's kind of the theme of the last 2 years, isn't it? So tell us about that experience.
Actually, it was really interesting. So I had a command chief that actually told me to try that out for the best warrior. Same chief said, why don't you try? Just throw your time in. So I did, and I knew it was competitive as far as like the race times. And I knew there was not teenagers, but, younger airmen out there, more capable, I thought. So I just threw it in, and all of a sudden I got this email sometime, I believe in May, and said, you're an alternate. And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I just couldn't believe that came down. And then through training, through most of like the summer, it was kind of ironic. They said, hey, we had a female fallout. Does anyone on the team know someone? And I said, oh my gosh, like if there's someone that's always ready to race, like you've got to be kidding me. Yes. So I think I texted Kristine within like the minute, and she just wrote back, yeah, sure. She's just always ready to roll. That's she joined on, and it was an easy add-on. I mean, it just all made sense.
So when the event went virtual, what did that mean for? What did that look like for you then? Because now Wright-Patterson, that's just to paint a picture. That's in Ohio. Klamath Falls, the airfield there sits at 4,200 feet above sea level. So that's some significant elevation. So what did you guys do when the event went virtual?
So my training specifically, all summer long, was very smoke filled because of our fires in this area, and it was challenging, but I had a lot of motivation because, again, I try to attach things to my family and maybe being a good influence on base for whatever reason. So I was keeping myself motivated, thinking like, who else would do this? I'm out here, hopefully at 40 years old, trying to like combine distance and speed, and something I kind of like gave up on, but I wanted to be a good motivation for my daughters. And then when it did go virtual, I knew that I was a losing motivation quick. So within those next 2 days, I planned to do my virtual race and turn in the results for me.
Oh, very good. That's a quick turn. Now, and where did you do your virtual race?
Right outside my door in Merrill. It's extremely flat. It's like a lake bottom. So basically, I just ran from one end of the valley to the other end of the valley, add on 2 miles. And it was kind of funny because I went out early that morning, and because I think it was the beginning of September, and I put little food plots and water along the way, like 2 water bottles and like 2 little snacks. And then basically just ran it at like 4 a.m. So I woke up at 3:40, drove, knocked out the food, came back, did a couple like stretches quick, and then just hammered it. And I didn't get the time I was wanting to, because like you said, it was supposed to be in Ohio, but I did it here at like 4,000 feet. So I didn't get the results I wanted, but it was still, I had cows cheering me on instead of people. So it was funny.
Oh, that's a great story. How about you, Kristi? What did that look like for you?
I actually didn't complete the virtual component. The way I was registered, something fell through, so I didn't complete the virtual component, to be honest with you.
Oh, no worries. No worries.
Yeah.
Well, so did you maybe through the pandemic, it's a lot of events like that that normally would be in person have shifted to virtual. And having run some big races myself, boy, there's it's kind of indescribable the feeling you get when you're lined up with thousands of people and you hear the starting gun and things slowly start to chug out. Now, Kristi, you're probably closer to the front with some of the elites, but that's a big difference. And have you, with your training, and Jared, you talked about that a little bit, but Kristi, did that impact your training at all, trying to work through the pandemic or get through these last couple of years?
Absolutely. The virtual, I don't know, it's about 20% of reality to me. Far less inspiring. The connectivity with other humans. I struggle with the virtual environment, especially for things like this, personally.
Mm-hmm. That is a big, and no matter what your fitness goals are, or what that plays, or what role that fills in your life, that connection to other people is such a huge part of it. Right. Well, so for 15 years or more now, we've been talking about resiliency in the military. And if we've learned anything, is that resilience, or what gives people fortitude to persevere in challenging settings like combat or a pandemic, or even just training for and running a marathon, it's not one size fits all. So how do you both describe resilience? And we know you're runners. What are some other things that you do to care for your own health and keep up your resilience? And do you do like cross training? And I'm not even sure if that's a term that people still use.
Well, I definitely do cross training. In fact, injuries have led me to more cross training. Whether it's, I do a little bit of CrossFit-ish. I don't do some of the, the big lifting type things and spinning. The yoga, I definitely got into yoga because of old injuries. But yeah, I will say resiliency, you have to acknowledge that you're going to fail, you're going to struggle, you're going to falter, but you've got to get up, you got to dust yourself off. You might need to take a moment and have a pity party and take the night off. I have, but it's those that keep going and those that you can't give up. You just can't give up. You're going to struggle. You're going to suffer. You still have to get up the next day and push on and be grateful that you failed and you have the motivation to keep going.
Yeah.
I think so.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jared.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I think someone that carries a 9mm while they're running should probably tell you they're pretty resilient. I completely agree. Like I feel like a lot of people today are scared to fail, and I don't understand why. Because I think a lot of our education comes from failures and like learning how to adjust and then go back and do it again. And I think a lot of like fitness is like that, right? Like if you have a goal you don't achieve and you try again, like why not? And I found so many parallels in fitness as like real world. And I completely agree with what she's saying. I don't understand why. Like it's fun to get outside. It's fun to get exercise, like some demons in your day, and to like blow some steam off after long days. And now we have like everything that's going on now, not just the pandemic, but just so many other things. And like they're great, healthy ways to get rid of some of those like thoughts and just go down to just focusing on yourself for a few minutes to take care of your fitness. Like it's a great way to like shake those things out, because I don't think of the pandemic when I run.
Yeah.
Or I'm doing jiu-jitsu. Like that's the last thing on my mind. I'm thinking about the moment. So.
Oh, some great themes that you brought up there. Well, first of all, you talk about some of the benefits that you get from running. Can you talk about that a little bit? There's such a tight relationship between our physical fitness, mental and emotional health, and even spiritual health. And we have to invest ourselves in staying healthy in those areas. What can you talk some more about that? Maybe the mental or spiritual benefits you might get from running?
Well, when I run, I feel like you get a reset. You know, like when you have a really awful day and you get a good night's sleep, and it's like, okay, I'm ready to deal with this again. I get like a reset, like a change of perspective. It forces me to stand back and look at from whoever's perspective or attacking a problem. It kind of changes the angle of what I'm looking at, because I'm not hurried to make a decision and that type of thing. So I think it's huge, and I feel better about the decisions that are made, you know, when I've had some time to jog them around the head without interruption. I think it's huge.
Do you listen to music when you run, or do you just run with the sound of your footsteps and the ambient sounds of the environment around you?
If it's a treadmill, definitely don't want to hear myself huffing and puffing. But if like back home, like in Alaska, if there's bears or if there's like a kind of a vulnerability, I won't wear headphones. It's just dependent on where I'm running, or if I'm running alone, or in a pack or a race. If it's a race, I definitely don't want to hear absolutely everyone huffing and puffing.
Right.
So
right.
I'll put on some tunes to tone that out a little bit.
Well, and when you're not listening to music or something like that, you know, it does kind of leave you alone with your thoughts. And even if you're running with other people, long periods of time will go by where maybe you don't say anything, and that's okay.
That's okay.
So
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, please do, Jared.
I was gonna say, like one of the things like you're talking about is resiliency has like no exact face, like right, it's written in jello, so it's different all the time. And I always felt like I try to explain that to some people here that I've either counseled with or been with, to talk about like what they can do or how they can frame it. And I always talked about it's like the straw that broke the camel's back. You know, people can get loads of issues in life and loads of frustrations, and things can come in waves. But then you have to find ways to unburden that, right? And I think that usually comes from like a perspective. Like, how do you, like, I could never look at like having the things that Kristen's been through, like med school. No, I can't do that. Like having the kids and single parenting, like that, those are hard, real hard. And like to gain a perspective of how challenging some of those things are, like you have to kind of weather the storm. You kind of have to find healthy ways to combat that, right? So you don't want the straw to break your back. You have to find ways to unload some of that burden. And I think by like social running or finding like something, maybe something was your past and you need to change it up, like you were saying, different fitness styles, now jiu-jitsu when it wasn't before, or biathlon. Yeah, I should try that. I think that'd be a lot of fun. So I think when I look at things, you know, people often remember, like I always felt it was funny, people remember basic training. Like no one wants to go do it again, but it always brings a smile to their face. They always like laugh about how hard, you know, they had it or something, but they don't go back and do it. And I always thought, why not? Like if you look at it with such joy and like humor, don't go back to basic, obviously not, but like find some way to push yourself or test yourself again. So I always thought that was interesting, like ways to try to bring different perspectives to people.
Just touching on one of the last things you said, Jared, I've heard that, I think it was through Team Red, White, and Blue, one of the veterans service organizations out there, but they challenged veterans and service members to, you know, don't let the last great thing you ever did be what you did on a deployment or on a combat tour or in the military or basic training, right? So don't let that just be the last great thing that you did, but find the next challenge and find something else that will push you to be better.
Yeah. One person I didn't want to bring him up, but I love the guy for what he is David Goggins. I don't know if you've heard his story or not, but like someone like that exists out there is amazing to me. And not that I want to go through what he's gone through, but like you can see he adapts to like something new and he just looks for the next challenge and stuff. So like he's really motivating to me because I'm like, I can't believe humans can do that. And that's amazing.
So maybe someone's listening to this podcast and they're thinking, well, I'm not a runner. I've never been a runner. You know, I only run when the Army makes me, or I only run 1.5 miles when the Air Force says I have to. So if, you know, what would you say to someone that's maybe on the fence about starting running a little bit more? Like, I mean, for years, I never took up running consistently because I didn't think I had the body type. And, well, you talked about this, Jared. Running is uncomfortable. It's one of those uncomfortable things. How do you get past those barriers? And how do you get comfortable with the discomfort? And, you know, how do you get started and grow, take those first steps out the door?
I think one of the things that we're finding out recently is everyone has like a natural gait. Like, so yes, running is natural when you don't have education on learning how you actually individually should learn to run. So people kind of go out there and they hack at it because they have never really had like an instructor or a teacher. One of the things that Kristen brought up was like social running, finding people that actually know how to run and just kind of like joining in with them. A lot of times they won't even try to push a pace. They'll just try to like sit there and talk to you, but still like get in stride with one another. So you have a good cadence going on. But even trying to understand, you know, what it is about like your running injuries or injuries that changed your running gait itself. Going back to the history, like my cousin getting me into running, like I was just like, no, I'm not a runner. That's not what I do. I jump, I play volleyball. And then I just knew there was something I was missing. And then that missing is like the education on how to kind of get your efficiency going. Yeah. Up to the PA. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. No, I remember seeing the t-shirt in high school that, you know, running is punishment in my sport. Right. You know,
yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Too funny.
So Kristi, how would you maybe encourage or coach someone who was trying to get past that barrier, saying, you know, I'm not a runner?
You know, I'm sure Jared can speak to this, with injuries and surgeries, you know, we all become non-runners pretty quickly. And it's getting it out there and getting your feet out on the track and moving. And it starts with running and walking, surrounding yourself with other knowledgeable humans on the matter is definitely helpful. Coaching style, educating yourself, using different techniques. A lot of folks that I train, we start with like a run walk. You know, we get, you know, walk for X amount of time and then, you know, a minute run. And then eventually that ratio of mostly walking becomes mostly running. So it's a progressive a change over time, but it does, your gait, and then some of it's mental toughness of like, you know, I'm okay, like I'm kind of hurting. I'm winded, I'm a little bit suffery, but I'm okay. I can do this. And folks get there in events like BMT, but then they fall back out of it. They, you know what I mean, that they were forced to, if you will, in BMT. But they don't know how to force themselves thereafter. When you get deconditioned, it's very challenging to get reconditioned and breaking those barriers. So it starts with not giving up. And there is trial and error. You'll probably have injuries, and just keep going. You've just got to keep going.
That's been a little bit of a recurring theme in our conversation this morning, hasn't it? You know, that just getting back on the path when you have a bad day or a bad week. Or, I mean, David Goggins, right? He found himself, he was working as an exterminator. Excuse me. He weighed over 300 pounds, and they told him he had to lose over 100 pounds if he wanted to come back into the Navy, right? So maybe part of it is, and we're still early in 2022, but I wonder how many New Year's resolutions have already gone off the rails. And, you know, and you've talked about coming back from injury too, and finding something different that will still move you toward your goals of staying fit and staying healthy and doing the things that you need to do to serve in your various vocations, whether that's in the military or being a parent or your chosen profession.
Yeah.
We were lucky enough for the last couple of years to have a guy on here called Dr. Mark Cucuzella. His nickname is called like the Air Force Run Doctor. And two of the things I thought that he brought to my attention that I never really thought of before was he did a research 1-year piece on an elementary school of noticing that kindergarten kids, before they sat down behind a desk all day long, that they had a natural, perfect form of running. This is before we put them behind the desk, before we made them sit down all day long. And he said these little runners were just naturally light and airy and springy, and they were just doing it the right way because they hadn't known the conditioning of the days of work yet, or, a day behind a desk or a chair. Mm-hmm. And so then they realized after a half a year of sitting behind a desk, they started to heel strike, which leads to a lot of injuries. And I'm not going to, elaborate too much on that. But then he asked the school, he said, put them back into where recess now is midday and end of day, and as opposed to morning and then midday. So then they basically would go out and they would run naturally again, and they would strengthen themselves back up and counteract like that heel striking and that overstriding. So that was really interesting to me. It was basically like, we were born naturally kind of springy and light and good athletes. And then over time, we kind of lose that form. And then another one of his chapters is talking about the way you walk is the way you run. And if you hold your posture upright with your core, and you start like you're running with your core instead of like these large muscle groups and damaging yourself, you'll find a lot better like response how you're running. So that was really interesting to me to read through his book and his teachings.
Yeah, and I think he actually wrote some articles for Military Times. Right? I've seen those things shared, and maybe it was in Runner's World as well. But you both kind of touched on this, I think, a little bit too, the social aspect of running and running with other people. And if there's one thing that runners like to talk about, it's running and sharing their passion for that with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So the big theme for the podcast is hope. So I want to ask you both, what gives you hope? Not just to keep running, but to keep grinding, to stay fit and to serve in each of your different callings, from the Air Force to your professions, your families, et cetera. What gives you both the hope to keep grinding?
For me, it's focusing on the positive, focusing on the people in my life, on what is in my control. I might not like all my options, but focusing on my best option, and what is in my choice. And hope is a choice to me, and choosing hope.
That sounds like Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. Have either of you read that book?
No.
He's the one that says that in between the stimulus and response, or so in between the thing that happens and your response to it, there's a gap. And in that gap is where you have the choice to choose how you'll respond. And Viktor Frankl, just again, the short version, he was a psychologist in Austria in the 1930s and 40s. He was captured by the Nazis and sent into the prison camp. And shortly after, less than a year after he was freed from the concentration camps, was lecturing and speaking about enduring life in the concentration camps and how you could find that hope and that will to survive, because there had to be, he realized there had to be something greater than our present circumstances to pull us through, starting with the fundamental assumption that every life has meaning, every person has value, and so that has to come from somewhere other than our present circumstances, and so because there's so much in life that we can't, that we don't have control over, that we don't choose, from the death of family members and loved ones, when relationships don't turn out the way that we would choose, when just hardships, maybe we lose a job or some other unforeseen challenge comes our way. We can't control that stuff, but we can choose how we respond to it. So I appreciate how you talk about that, Kristi. How about you? How about you, Jared?
Yeah, actually, recently, my wife's been going through a divinity degree, just trying to understand just different principles and religions and ideas. And one of the areas she came across was the idea of like this time that we're here on this plane is talking about like trials and, experiencing discomfort, whether it's mental, spiritual, physical discomfort. Like we have hot and cold. We have, like you're going through middle school, high school, college. You don't know who you are yet. You're trying to experience love and relationships. And we're going through pandemics and we have spiritual hardships. And so like this kind of time that we have here is to experience these and persevere, and people that kind of, in my mind, stand by and kind of don't experience it, it becomes like a layered effect. And I think like she was saying is if you have a chance to go out and experience things, like it's fun. Like it's, I think a lot of people don't look at running as fun, but once they get back in from running, they're like, oh man, I'm glad I got that done.
Yeah.
And then I kind of feel the same way. Like if I don't get an experience in a run, time with my daughters at jiu-jitsu or whatever it is, like I kind of get annoyed with myself. Like, you missed out on something that could have been. So I think that brings in that level of hope of like, I want to experience like the emotion, the spirituality, the physicality. So I kind of look forward to that addiction of pressing those buttons and trying the new things.
I agree completely. And I think it's interesting. And just maybe a week or so ago, I got a survey question through email, and it was asking about suffering and choosing to take on hard things or things, choosing discomfort learning how to become comfortable with discomfort. Now, I tried to, in my response, I tried to point out, I think there's a difference between those things that happen to us that cause suffering. Because I don't think that's chosen. I don't think it's really suffering maybe if we choose to take it on necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
You'd probably find some caveats to that, but but there's certainly value in doing hard things and pushing yourself, stepping outside your comfort zone, taking some risk, a risk of taking on something that maybe there's a chance that you'll fail. What do you think the benefit is in choosing those challenges?
I definitely think there's benefit in challenging yourself, and just having that underlying premise that life comes with suffering, and sometimes it does need to be self-induced. Like I tell my kids, you need to suffer. I mean, every day there will be a suffer. There's going to be your public speaking class. There's going to be a struggle. There's going to be a suffer, and learning to suffer and accepting it. And pushing yourself, sometimes you've got to, step it up athletically, socially, emotionally, step outside your comfort zone, have that uncomfortable conversation with your subordinate. Like there's suffering in life, and accepting that suffering is part of it. I think is huge, moving forward.
I think where I was trying to go with that a little bit too is if we make being comfortable our goal, if your goal is just to be comfortable and not have anything bad happen, you're going to be pretty quickly disappointed. And so challenging yourself, I think, prepares you to be adaptable and to face the hard things that come.
Yeah, definitely.
Dr. Jordan Peterson, I think, says people don't avoid or seek comfort; they seek to avoid discomfort. And I think like people can stay at home and say like, no, I'm not going to go out. I'll just stay here because I know where I'm at here. But if I go outside, I might have interactions with people I don't want, or traffic or whatever it is. And I do think like, to me, that's not living. That's kind of avoiding those, like she was saying, like new things in life, new challenges in life. Like, I mean, I think everyone can point to times that they were anxious, but then they got over it, and then it was a successful moment in their life.
Well, and I think that's baked into who we are in the military. Now, certainly we can fall into those traps too, and even while we're serving, kind of try to avoid a lot of discomfort and really get complacent. But it really is part of what we do in the military. Is it pushes us outside of our comfort zones. You both talked about basic training and the deployment experiences and competitions, things like that will push us outside of our comfort zones and help us to test our limits and help us see how far we really can go when we try.
Definitely.
So, Chris, you've been sitting there quietly and listening to this conversation. And any questions that you might have for Kristi or Jared?
For both of you, being that you're endurance athletes, one of the things that always perplexes me or I have an interest in it is the runner's wall that you hear about. I've been there a couple times in my life, but I know that there's people that will never experience it. And just your personal experiences with it, if it's something that you can tell is coming on, how it affects you, and just kind of to give us the inside scoop on being an endurance athlete and when you hit that.
Or is that called is that called going into the pain cave in ultras? Yeah.
Yeah, right. I can definitely speak to the wall. Mile 17, I can tell you, for me, it is mile 17 every single time. And knowing that I can just feel it coming on, I feel like I can't move, feel like I'm out of breath. I'm completely out of energy. But pushing past that, if I can get through that mile and a half of absolute suck, it's the worst mile and a half of my life. I feel amazing at the end. Getting past it. I hit it every time. I've never not hit it. So I don't, those that escape it, like, you're amazing. You're absolutely amazing. It's part of the suffer for me.
Yeah, as you're asking that question, I started laughing, thinking about the times that it's come. And I think it's a fun way in my mind is like it's a chess match because you know it's coming, and you're waiting for it, and you're like, okay, I'm taking my salts at the right time. I'm taking food and water. I'm hydrating. Okay, the sun's not fully on. Like you have these little fleeting thoughts that go through your head, and you're like, I'm gonna survive and push through, and then it hits. And yeah, mine same thing is right around like 20, like 16 to 20, or something longer. It depends, like just kind of where you're at, but every time there's something that kind of keeps you moving, or just maybe you go from a certain pace and you slow down a little bit and just keep the legs moving. And I don't know what it is that after you kind of get to those cramps and you get to that, I don't know, like that frustration is like, no, just I give up on this. Like it goes through my head. I guarantee it, like it always goes through my head. But then as soon as it's done, you're like, I can do better next year, or I can figure a way to make it not suffer as much next time. So I kind of always enjoy that aspect of it.
Thank you for sharing your experience with it. It's very insightful. Thanks.
As you were both answering, I was reminded of a book. It's a great book on kind of getting started in ultra running. It's a fantastic title. It's called Relentless Forward Progress. And I recall one line from that book that if it hurts to walk and it hurts to run, just run, which is it's kind of a metaphor for life, right? So, yeah, relentless forward progress. And if it hurts to walk and it hurts to run, just run, keep running,
keep going.
Well, I've never experienced Alaska's weather, but I've done Oregon weather the wrong way sometimes, where I went out dressed in the wrong attire, or somehow my glove got wet because my water bottle or something and my hands were freezing. Like I've had the run that can't get any worse. And I usually compare a lot of my runs to those runs where I'm like, you'll be fine. Like it's been worse. So I'm sure everyone, like both of you have had those experiences before.
Oh yeah.
Where you can always compare, like, dude, it won't get worse than that time.
Yep, completely.
And it is possible to keep going and to keep running and to keep living with hope and positivity. Kristine, Jared, thank you both so much for your time today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, again, thanks again. It's been great to talk to you again. So, it's just an honor. Thank you.
Well, God bless you both, and blessings to your families and to your work. Take care, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Take care.
This podcast is produced by the Oregon National Guard Public Affairs Office. My prayer for you is that wherever you find yourself, that you might find hope for today and strength for the ambiguity and chaos of life. Blessings on the rest of your day.